Welcome to the Public Art Advisory Committee, Wednesday, October 27th at 4:30 p.m. This meeting is compliant with the Ralph M. Brown Act as amended by California Assembly Bill number 361, effective September 16th, 2021, providing for a public health emergency exception to the standard teleconference rules required by the Brown Act. The purpose of this, is to provide a safe environment for the public, staff, and the committee while allowing for public participation. The public may address the committee using exclusively remote public comment options. The committee may take action on any item listed in the agenda. People may post public comment by joining this meeting. They may email aibera@brisbaneca.org, or they may text 415-407-2675. All right, and it looks like everyone is joining us, Lisa and Camille. Wonderful. So Stuart, would you like to kick us off? Oh, actually, roll call. Mayor Cunningham.
Here.
Councilmember Davis.
Here.
Park and Rec Commissioner Bulgoff is absent. Park and Rec Commissioner Greenlee.
Here.
Committee member Danette Davis.
Here.
Committee member Beth Grossman.
Here.
Committee member Olivier Salmon. Olivier Salmon? I can't hear you. You're muted. Is it Olivier Salmon? I think I asked you that every time.
Yes, it is. And thank you. And I'm here.
All right. First is approval of minutes. Approved minutes from August 19th, 2021. Public Art Advisory Committee. Are there any questions, additions, changes?
I have none.
Everyone approved on the minutes?
Do you do a roll call vote on this or just a thumbs up?
I'll do a roll call vote. I'm just making sure everyone was fine. Does everybody approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
A
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call vote. Mayor Cunningham,
Aye.
Councilmember Davis,
Aye.
Park and Rec Commissioner Greenlee,
Aye.
Committee member Danette Davis,
Aye.
Committee member Beth Grossman. Beth, I see your mouth. But
Aye.
And Committee member Salmon.
Aye.
All right, great. All right, moving on to presentations and discussion items. Stuart, you want to take over reviewing the public art fund balance?
Sure. There have been no changes since the last time we presented it to you. We are closing the books for June, so we haven't allocated any additional interest yet, but we will allocate additional interest based on the earnings of the, based on the portion the public art fund is of the overall city's portfolio. So by the time I do this again for our January meeting, we'll have additional interest, but there have been no additional building between July and September, which is what this is through. So there was no changes to the public art fund.
Does anybody have any questions?
Nope.
Okay. Okay, item C, review the library art installation process.
So
Stuart,
I
you wanna-
laid, yep. I laid out for you the process that we went through. This was prior to the current public art committee being formed. So there was an ad hoc committee between the city council and the Parks and Recreation Commission. The council, the 5 members reviewed all the different proposals. They accepted and recommended Phil Gutlove as the proposer. They had said that they had wanted to have the commission be highlighting the butterflies and the mission blue butterflies if possible. The allocation for the project was $50,000. This went to the city council and the council approved the artist in May of 2017, as it says in the staff report. We signed a contract with the artist. Contrast did the commission the work, and it is now up and installed over Labor Day weekend in the library. So this is not the same process that we would go through in the future. In the future, any public art process would go through the Public Art Committee. If there are any questions about what we did. Beth?
Yeah, I'm curious about if, what I understood was there was some direction originally that people really liked her abstract work that was shown on her website. And the idea was that we would potentially have something like, something abstract like that, that would show off all the light and the color and the glass. And also, I was also under the impression that the light would work naturally rather than having electric lights. And I'm curious about how it went from that to the very literal butterflies that are all basically from a same mold. And that I am also wondering if that original design went through any kind of a sort of review process before she was given the go-ahead to start fabricating.
The contract did not call for it to go through a review process, so it did not. The idea was that the artist always told this committee and the council that it was the interaction of the LED lights that caused the most change for the light that you see on the wall, that there is a little bit of ambient light that does cause some changes throughout the day. So I think the ultimate project was similar to what the city council subcommittee or the ad hoc committee and the city council approved. So I don't think it was far off from what they had anticipated.
So I guess for learning for the future, because I was under the impression that there was this idea that we chose her based on her work on her website, which was very much abstract, colorful glass. And that I guess I would recommend for the future that once the artist has a design for the specific space, that it go through a review process with this committee, and then ultimately, however else, whatever our guidelines say, if maybe at that point then with the city council. But to me, it was like, doesn't look like anything on her website. And it's just very literal, and also they're all the same, and they don't even, I don't know, really look like Mission Blue butterflies. So I just felt like I was really under the impression that if you look at her website, that they would have been airy and light and refracting and interesting, and they're just these kind of crowded, stagnant group of glass, cast glass, heavy cast glass butterflies. And I just kind of curious about like how did it all happen? We went from this wonderful idea to what we got. So I want to make sure that we have a chance before we go into any kind of fabrication to know what we're going to get.
Well, I mean, according to the guidelines, item 6 under public installed public art, once the conceptual plan has been approved by the Public Art Committee, the artist or artist's team shall refine the project objectives and the conceptual design plan according to the direction of the Public Art Committee. So I think that is what the Public Art Committee has done with the last project. Was after it got a general approval, it went through a very rigorous process with the Public Art Committee to refine what would be ultimately shown. So I think that issue has been taken care of under the current guidelines and with what the Public Art Committee has done in the past.
Okay.
Which then would bring us to the discussion of the implementation of the guideline, public guidelines, if there's no other questions about the library project.
I have nothing.
Okay. In the middle of the staff report, there were 3 items that the committee has wanted to have brought back for a discussion. On page 2, item 1 is, can the funds that are deposited into the general public art fund that were not earmarked for specific permanent public art projects possibly be considered for performing temporary art, local art shows, or community arts and educational programming? Question number 2 was, do we want to have anything written in these guidelines that will ensure that whatever endeavors we take on with the artists, architects, landscapers, and other service providers follow the equal opportunity laws, that we as a commission make a concerted effort at outreach? And do we have any protocol to deal with potential situations where a developer and the public art committee cannot come to an agreement with an acceptable art project on their private property? So the answer with the funds is, as it's currently written, there is not room for us to do performing art or local art shows. There is money that could be allocated for community arts educational programming, and then the question of temporary art. The guidelines call for more of a permanent art, so the question would be, what is the definition of permanent versus temporary? But I think if you want to have something where art is on display for about a year or so, or something like the idea of being able to store, as part of the public art process, store something from something like a Burning Man exhibition, you would probably want to make a recommendation to the city council to amend the guidelines to allow for those types of instances. And if you want to have local art shows or performing art, both of those would need to have an amendment to the current guidelines. For number 2, we already are, the city is an equal opportunity employer. We put that out on everything that we do as a city. So if the Public Art Commission would like to further define, have that specifically in the public art guidelines, that would be, we could add that to there. There wouldn't be any conflict with anything else that the city does. And then for the protocols for the public, if it's a private public art done by a private company on private property, there is still a review process for the city council to review that and determine if it meets the needs of the community. So there is still an ability for a review at the city council level. With that, I'll open up to the commission to discuss any of these 3 issues, or if there's other issues about the guidelines that you would like to see changed.
I would just have one thing, well, a couple of things, but first, I know that when we go into performing arts, that kind of opens up a very broad kind of range of possibilities. But I think it would be interesting if there's a piece that the city, for whether it's temporary or permanent or whatever, that coincides with whether it's an avant-garde performance piece or whether it was spoken word, that we should make sure that we have something within our guidelines that doesn't stop the artist from being able to be a part of that, or have that included in their work. And I don't know how other people feel, but I think it would be important to make sure that we allow that opportunity for the artist.
So just to make sure that I can understand that, the public art guidelines as they're currently written would basically be for art that is permanently on display within the city. So something like a spoken word art piece or a performance art piece would not be on permanent display. So but I also know there's mixed media type of art. So are you
Different.
talking about mixed media, or are you talking about true performing art?
No, mixed media means, at least in my understanding of the definition, is that there's different materials used in a installed piece of art. That's my understanding.
Okay. Well, but what I'm hearing from Camille is that she's looking for more true performing art that does not stay permanent within the city, but is performed at a given point in time and then can be performed someplace else in another given point in time. That's at least looking at the hand signals from Camille, that was my understanding.
Camille, can you explain that a little?
Well, here's my thought. I'm thinking, for instance, we think about the new trail that's coming in, and there are places there that may have temporary art pieces that correlate with some sort of performance piece. And I think the way that the guidelines are written right now, that would not be allowed. And I'm just saying, in order for us to be able to not pass up something that could be really exciting, we might want to make sure that we consider that particular element.
Agreed. I mean, part of my personal fantasy about the linear park situation is that it has everything on it and everything allowed. And one of the things that I saw when I was actually doing some research on it was like these mini amphitheaters. So our current guidelines wouldn't allow, Stuart, correct me if I'm wrong here.
Precise.
So if somebody wanted to do, I don't know, a flamenco thing in this little thing, or read poetry or whatever, that wouldn't be allowed, even if we had a permanent structure there for that kind of art presentation. Is that correct, Stuart?
Correct. The way that the guidelines are currently written is that the Public Art Fund would not fund that performance or
Well,
that piece of art.
Plus, one of my other fantasies is, people who have these giant pieces of art could come in on a rotating basis. And if that wouldn't be allowed as it's currently written, is that correct?
They would not be funded by the Public Art Fund. I mean, all of those things would be allowed. It just wouldn't be funded through the Public Art Fund.
And that's kind of what I'd like to make sure that we have within our guidelines for that possibility. Now, I'm not allocating that all of a sudden that the Public Arts Committee becomes a producer. I mean, I'm not advocating that, to be quite clear. What I am suggesting is that there are situations where artists do sculpture pieces or large pieces or even temporary mixed media pieces that are accompanied by whether it's music or word or movement or whatever. And I would hate for us to lose out on those possibilities and opportunities because the guidelines do not allow that.
I have one more question, Stuart. What if, in addition to what Camille's just saying, and I've kind of mentioned as well, what if within the confines of our fantasy linear park for now, that an artist comes in, not so much as a teaching situation, but it's sort of making something as they go along that other people can be a part of and contribute. That sounds to me like it would be an interesting opportunity within the city for our citizenry, and that wouldn't be funded either.
No, it would be if it's if it would be permanently located within Brisbane. So I think even in Camille's situation, where if you had a sculpture that had spoken word as part of it or music as part of it, as long as it's a permanent piece within the city of Brisbane, that could be currently funded by the Public Art Fund. It would be more if it was a performance that was not permanently located here. So if you have a piece like when we talked with the muralist, we talked with a couple of muralists who would work with the community to help paint the mural and to help educate people on how, on the mural. Since the mural would be permanent within the city, that would be allowed, which I think gets to your question, Karen.
I think so. I kind of agree with the whole line of thought that Camille went with, is if we've got these pieces that are missing, this would be the time for us to fix that, to make it as broad as possible, rather than, gee, I don't know, 12 months from now, somebody comes up with this great idea and then we've got to scramble back and look at, what do these guidelines say, and try and make changes on the fly.
Lisa has something.
Oh, yeah. So just as somebody who is thinking about this fund, and I'd like a little clarification about this within the idea of a park, or, as a park and rec person or as a park and rec representative, I don't know if this is included in the funding as a space, but but creating performance spaces that performance or art could be made or displayed. And that seems like something that could be paid for out of the arts fund, but it would be more of an open space, like a stage or like a amphitheater or something.
Well, I think part of that is part of the trail. They've included that in.
Well, and it could be anywhere. It doesn't necessarily, like you could have, I kind of envisioned somewhere, and maybe not on the trail, but somewhere in the city, you could have a really large blank wall that could be used to project films on when we have a film event, and it's just a facility. It's just a blank palette that can be used as the city needs it. You know what I mean? It itself is not art, but just like a blank stage or a blank wall that something can be projected on, it could be used in the arts. And does that qualify as something that this fund might possibly pay for as a city, as a fixture for our city?
I think as they're currently written, no, because the committee that wrote these guidelines and presented them to the commission and to the council was really trying to fund artists directly and not provide so much the space for the artists to show their work. So
Okay.
I think if that's the goal of this current committee, then the guidelines would need to be changed.
Okay, well,
It's not to say that there couldn't be funding from the general fund and be approved by council to
Right.
create that space. It doesn't necessarily have to specifically come out of this public art if you don't want to open up maybe that can of worms or whatever, or if it would cause something like that. I don't know.
yeah, but I just wonder what, if this narrows our vision to what art is going to be supported, because I know that some, it sounds like, and it's fine with me if that's what this is that this is pretty much just visual art. It's pretty much just installed visual art. And so it doesn't include art venues. It doesn't include more generic art spaces, like parks and stuff. And I'm not sure if we open it up to that, or if that's really what this commission is about. I'm really thinking as a park and rec person that I kind of like art that benefits the community as a space. But if it's just to install visual art, then that's kind of what it's written like.
That was the original vision of the committee that wrote it, that it was
Okay.
supporting artists who did visual art that was permanent within the city. That doesn't mean that needs to be where the public art fund ends up. And as Angel said, it doesn't mean that other types of art can't be funded by other mechanisms within the city. So it's really a question for the Public Art Committee as to what you want to see this fund be used for it. And it doesn't preclude the city from doing other things, of course.
Yeah, that's true. It's just that it's not, it seems like it's really hard to get art spaces built into our budget as a city. And this would be nice to have a little more wiggle room to use some of this budget for some of the art venues as a park and rec person, spaces for the arts. But I know that's broad, that's very broad. So
Right.
anyways, I'll shut up. Go ahead.
And all I would say to that is I think the original committee was concerned that the cost of art venues may eat up the entire fund and therefore not have money available for the artists themselves. I see.
Okay, I get
Camille
it.
has her hand up, and I don't know, Beth, do you have your hand up as well?
Yes, I have.
So I think you've had it up for a while. So Beth first.
Okay. So I'm all for having those kinds of art spaces. Like we should definitely have an amphitheater and a wall space and all those kinds of things. But I'm hoping that that money wouldn't have to come out of this particular fund. And that maybe it could be something like, when the developer has to give back something to the community, like they gave us the Mission Blue Center, whatever that but maybe that could be designated in that way. But I know that we're gonna need that kind of thing. and some kind of an amphitheater, outdoor amphitheater would be really lovely. And I hope that we can find some way to do that. But before we wrap up these guidelines and seal them for the time being, I would like to know that there's some mechanism in place that would pay for those kinds of things. So that's my first point. My second point is that well, I actually got a chance to review those original guidelines, and this was my question that I was begging to have answered back in the day. And the idea was that they just needed to get this passed as it was for visual art. But I always felt it was incomplete because the people that were working on it didn't have like a full idea about what art is today. And now it's all about activating landscape, not just activating landscape in terms of moving land and creating land art, but it's also about putting people and dancers and music and turning a landscape sculpture into some kind of a sound machine. I mean, there's it's so way bigger than what most people have any kind of sense of what is possible in terms of public art. And that was one of the reasons I want to put in a plug for that Nevada Land Art Conference that's been going on. They have been amazing, and it's a really great overview of what different people have tried and what's gone on historically and where we are now with this land art movement. I think that what is exciting that's going on, for example, in particular right now, because we got all of those public art sculptures of all those lieutenants and colonialists, and now we don't know what to do with them. So something that we may think is totally benign today, in not too much time could become very politically incorrect. And so a lot of what's going on is more temporary installations, and they could be anywhere from a day, like I just went to see one out at Ocean Beach where it was about sea level rise, and there were these beautiful plexiglass tubes with the sun coming down. It was all timed with the waves and everything, and a dance performance that was absolutely exquisite. And that was the public art, and it drew a good crowd, and it got a lot of publicity, and it became an event. So it was a public art event with a physical art things and dance. To being able to do things like having something up for a while, for anywhere from a month to a year to 10 years. But I think the idea now, what I'm really getting is that nothing is permanent, and I'm not sure we want it to be, because we're in such a huge transition in terms of what does Black Lives Matter really mean, and what is what about gender, and what about trying to decolonialize our landscapes and our cities, and where does the Native American returning the land movement fit into all of this? I mean, and then how do we educate people about why we're even mounting these kinds of sculptures? And that's why I'm hoping that there will be a major education component that could be funded as part of this. So my last thing I want to say is that some of this may be funded in other city budgets. I know that we do have the artists, what was it called? Stuart, help me out. Where a Brisbane artist could apply as a resident to put on some kind of a performance event, the co-sponsorship program. So there may be, and I'm not sure like what kinds of funds are in that, and how where that money comes from, out of what budget or any of that, but some of that could come from there. And then where would the educational component funds come from? So I think before we are able to really make any real decisions on this, I'd kind of like to know what other funds are available in the city, and how could some of those be used for this? Because right now there's not that much money. Eventually, I'm hoping that there will be quite a lot.
So before I answer that, I know Camille had her hand up, so I'll get back to that one, Beth.
Okay.
Stuart, Danette's had her hand up along.
Oh, Danette, I'm sorry.
Thanks.
I didn't see it. I apologize.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I do have concerns about the performance aspect, and not quite understanding if it was always just performance that goes in collaboration with an art piece. So I'm kind of concerned about that. I'm just wondering if you like that component, once you add that in, does that then start becoming all just different kinds of performances that get depleted from the art budget? So I have concerns about depleting the budget and that it becomes performances and really not having funds available for significant art installations. So that's one of my concerns. And if it is something that there is definite interest in, is there a cap per year on performance pieces? So those are my concerns. And in terms of like providing a performance space, I really believe that should come out of a different budget myself, whether, like Beth said, whether it's a developer or a city funded, because what we have in the bank could be gone and just, you know, a bench or an elevator if you're talking about some kind of performance place. So those are concerns I have.
So it's my understanding for the Baylands development, I think that it is proposed that they're going to be doing turning the roundhouse area into an outdoor amphitheater. And then I think there are also discussions about doing something similar, like a Mission Blue type of indoor space as well. So I think there are some opportunities with that. And that's tied to the developer. They have to do their 1% for this entire build out there. So they'll do it probably in various ways, you know, partly to fund the amphitheater and they'll be doing that and proposing that to us, as well as then maybe, you know, areas for large installations or temporary installations or whatever the committee so chooses. So that part is tied to the developer, but I'm not sure about any other. Stuart, do you know of any other, I guess, space or money that would come for building a space other than this budget, unless it was just proposed?
I mean, it would have to be part of the normal city's capital improvement project process.
So would that happen where the committee would recommend and put maybe something together?
Right.
To the council for
right,
CIP?
and that would go through, that would compete with other capital improvements of the city.
So there isn't a guarantee necessarily that it would be there. Beth.
Correct.
So
that would be a council decision at that time, at that point in time.
So Beth, I think what you're looking for is like some guarantee of where it would come from, whatever, and we can't give that to you. That's,
but you mentioned a 1% on the build out. Is that separate from the 1% for the arts?
No, that would be part of the 1% for the art.
Correct.
So 1% for the entire build out is all coming from the developer, not from individual people who are building, like maybe some kind of a business or a
it depends. It would depend on how it gets built.
Right.
So, I mean, the way that the public art fund reads is that you have to do 1% of the value of the building. So it depends on who builds the buildings, whether it's the developer who builds it, or if it's the developer sells the land to somebody else to build it. Mm-hmm. So it's based on the building permit value is how we get our 1%.
And if they put out the big shells of like the shell of the large buildings, we get that 1%. And then whoever they sell or rent that building to and do all these improvements inside, which is easily $1 million cap to build out an entire inside, that's another 1%.
Got it.
As well.
But remember, like when the developers, they have to give something like a pool or the Mission Blue Center or a park or whatever. Mm-hmm. Is that different from the 1%?
That is different. So that they don't actually have to give that. What that is, it's a negotiation between the city and the developer to come to an agreement for a development agreement, and that development agreement provides rights for the developer and provides opportunities for the city. So, you know, one of the things that a development agreement does is locks in the costs for the developer at the time that the development agreement has been agreed to. So it's a negotiation between the city and the developer as to what that might actually look like and what it might mean. And it's up to the city council to make a determination as to what will be in that development agreement. So there's no guarantee as to what that will be.
I see. So meaning that the city will negotiate with the developer for an amount of money, and then the city gets to decide what they're going to use it for?
It might be an amount of money. It might be different amenities that will be at the site that are not required either through CEQA or through current city ordinances.
So currently they've already proposed doing like the outdoor amphitheater, for example, at the, and that wouldn't eat up the whole budget. There would still be more money to actually maybe physically give us money, or maybe they will down the road propose something else for in the parks that they want to control that we would approve or negotiate and figure out at the committee level.
It's more likely that the council will say, we want you to fund a high school, or we want you to build a giant park, or we want you to, do something with the roundhouse. It's going to be those types of things that we're going to say that are important to us. And then we will negotiate back and forth. And then they might say, okay, well, if you want that, then we need 2,200 units.
Yeah. But
We need 7 million
that's
square
those
feet.
things that you're negotiating, what I want to get clear about is that those things that you're negotiating for
Have
are
nothing to do
not
with it.
part of the 1%
Nope.
for the arts.
No, the 1% of the public art is a current requirement of the project. Anything that would be where they would want to have something in writing that guarantees them what they would, something that they want, we would ask for a guarantee above and beyond what the current stipulations are. Camille?
I just want to clarify, especially for Danette's purposes in terms of the performing arts, Danette. I agree with you. I don't think that our funds should be used to put on reviews or whatever. But I do think that the guidelines, the way that they are now, is at the same way that for instance, the example that Beth gave, where that piece was shown out by the ocean, which is a beautiful art piece. There's also those things. So to somehow include that, so when we're doing a piece, whether it's, and this would be the discussion, what is temporary as opposed to what is permanent, so that we're clear on that. But if there's inside of those pieces, there is something that makes that particular piece performative or has an element of performative to it. I'm not advocating for a dance festival or a poetry slam or a script reading. I'm not advocating for that. I'm advocating for conjunctions between ideas.
Right. So, I mean, as they're currently written, I would think that if there's a permanency to an aspect of the art, then anything else they do with it would be, I would read it as being allowed. I mean, obviously, a future public art committee and a future city council may see that differently. So if you want to have a better definition of this, then absolutely, make recommend a change to the city council so it could be more clear and less open to interpretation going forward. Lisa?
I'm going to throw another little handball into the court. But I do want to make sure, and this, I was just looking at the guidelines, that I really do think that this committee would be helped by getting some art advice from a consultant or an art curator, which we've talked about before. And I just wanted to know if this budget would cover something like that. Somebody who might, bring in art for us to consider that we haven't thought about in our small little world. Yeah. So is that covered in our guidelines?
The guidelines do allow for that to be a portion of the money can be used for that purpose.
Okay, I thought maybe that's under the 20% for project administration.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, good. That's all I wanted to know.
I don't know who was next, Beth or Danette, but Beth.
Well, just briefly, I also, when we start to really think about really specific projects, I think at that point, it would be good to have an art consultant, advisor, whatever. But right now we really need to educate ourselves, because otherwise we're depending on one person with a very limited perspective, which would be her taste, her set of contacts, the artist she wants to promote. Okay, so I really feel like before we can entertain somebody like that, until we have specific projects, it's really up to us to educate ourselves, to know the history of what's gone on in public art, what's the current discourse right now about, decolonializing and all the things that I mentioned before. And we have this great opportunity, I can't underline enough, that we say we only had to spend $150 on. That's not even an hour of an art consultant, to really sit through. And I know it's academic and I know it's time consuming, but those lectures are really some of the top art consultants, art thinkers, art curators in the world giving presentations right now. It's an amazing opportunity. It's horribly missed. It will be a missed opportunity, and that we will not get. I feel like we really need to have the big picture of what this field is about if we're on this commission, before we start putting all of our faith into one curator's small bag, basically, of tricks.
And after
people that they
watching,
want to promote.
yeah, and after watching all them, a lot of them have differences of what they think actually land art is, and they're not necessarily in agreement either. So that was
Right,
very interesting.
And I get that. I get that. I just think that visual art, land art, art that includes, flat art, digital art. I mean, all different kinds of art. I just think that a good consultant would be literate in all of that. And if they were not, no, I mean, you can shake your head and say, no, they're not going to be, but a good consultant would be open to what you wanted and not necessarily push their agenda as far as what they think, their particular artist pet projects that they want to do. You would hopefully interview somebody that had a broad range of art to offer, and not somebody with just a portfolio that you're just going to look at and pick from, So anyways, that would be part of the process of choosing a good consultant, because I don't pretend to have as broad a range of knowledge as I think I could. And I don't think anyone does on this committee, so I just think it would be helpful. Anyways.
Yeah. And we've talked about that as, trying to bring somebody in to help us with that. And that, that would be we would write an RFP and we would send it out and try and find somebody who this committee felt comfortable with, as you said, Lisa, that the whole committee would feel comfortable with, and it would be somebody that could, cross different genres of art. Danette, I know you had your hand up before, and then Camille.
So I want to talk about the performance aspect again, and how I'm wondering, because I'm not comfortable right now about adding that. And I'm wondering if that's something that maybe we can revisit, or if the opportunity comes up, we can always add it to our guidelines that we have already established. I'm just concerned that our fund could end up being depleted and really not having pieces for actual installation. So, and it's nothing to say I have anything against performance art, but right now I'm not comfortable with that. So I don't know what the other committee members are thinking, or if that was something like there would be a cap, a certain percentage of or budget, or is it always with a piece? You know, is if this particular piece happens to have a performance, that's how it works. I still have a lot of questions and a lot of uneasiness about that. And so that's where I am on the topic.
I think what might make some sense is, bringing back a list of topics for the committee to talk about as it relates to changes to the guidelines. And that way the committee can say, maybe spend a little bit of time on each of the topics and flesh out what they mean by performance art, what they mean by visual art, what they mean by temporary art. So that way they could be better defined within the guidelines itself.
Mhm.
Camille,
Yeah,
I know, yeah. So
Yeah,
we could
that's
bring
good.
that back at a future meeting. I mean, there's nothing, in the words of David Stockman years ago, this is done on a word processor, so they could always be changed. It's just a matter of,
Sure.
bringing it back to the city council. And, we could, as opposed to looking to bring it back this year, we could bring, we're not doing anything outside of these guidelines at the current time. So maybe we can spend a little bit of time going through the guidelines, while at the same time, we have talked about, going out and developing an RFP to help create a master plan for the Baylands public art. And I think maybe we can do both of those in parallel, so that way we are able to have a better conversation about the Baylands, and then have a, while at the same time not moving, not stopping to make sure that the implementation guidelines are perfect first. But Camille, I know you had your hand up.
Oh, I'm fine. That's what I was going to suggest. I think that we need to, instead of kind of get a topic and talk about that and flesh that out, instead of
Yeah.
ping ponging back and forth. That was my suggestion. I have one other question though, that I would, because I know that part of what we're doing, what I'm getting is we're, getting clarification on what performance art is. We've gotten better clarification on the understanding of funds coming in. And I know that we're also looking at next projects, so to speak. But I don't know if everyone, maybe the two new people, ever got the map about places that we are talking about before those of us who have been on it jump into the next thing. I think it's only apropos that we make sure that everyone who's coming to the table knows the possibilities. And so I would like to recommend that we see that map, or they get a
Sure.
copy of that map.
We'll bring that to the next meeting.
Okay.
And I see Karen and Madison are giving me high fives, so cool. We're on the right road.
No, I got my hand up because I want to say something.
Oh, I thought that was a high five. I'm sorry.
So further to the comments about art consultants, can we do some research on who is out there and what they bring to the table, so we can at least look at that and say, moving forward, this person might be useful for us to talk to.
I have done that, but yeah.
Did you give it to anybody, or you just did?
Yeah, I mailed it to the city. At least the two people that were recommended to me who've done a lot of work for other cities, who seem to have a pretty varied portfolio and completely different styles of management. I mean, yeah, and who I originally talked to about it was a person who does a lot of public art. And like, who have you worked with that you really liked? And he gave me two names. And so I forwarded that to the city. And that's where it lays.
I would like to see us do a little bit of research and see what's out there, because I will tell you, relative to the idea of an art consultant being hired by us, I am 100% ignorant to the facts of what they would all bring to the table collectively and individually. I know if suddenly we're going to do a steel project, we're not going to bring a paper mache expert in to deal with that. So yes, we all need to be educated, but we need to be educated.
Yeah, that's what
that level too.
That's what's interesting about public art consultants, people who have done art within cities. particularly within cities, and worked with city councils and worked with public spaces.
Right.
Those are the people I think that are the most qualified, at least to show what's been done before. Now, whether we want to go down that path, who knows? I mean, who knows if we like what this person's done at all? But I think that that qualification was what I was looking for. So.
Sure,
anyway.
but given that just about every single ounce, every single second of every day right now is hyper politicized for one reason or another, and usually for greed and ego, I wouldn't know who to believe right now. It's you know, I mean, we've got so many balls in the air, you know, in our country. It's like, you know, people are going to sell you a bowl of wax.
Well, you know, I can just briefly say that one of the people who was suggested, her husband is a Bay Area Native American, so has a lot of ties to the Native American community.
Mhm.
And, you know, that might be helpful. And the other person is a more savvy, you know, New York type, high art, you know, more of that kind of a person. And so those are just two examples. I mean, there could be millions. And if you want to talk to some of your artist friends or people that you really respect in the art world, I hope that we would have connections in that way.
Can I just
you
say
know,
something for
Yeah,
clarification
go ahead.
real quick? Because I feel like we might be getting down a rabbit hole, because if we were going to hire a consultant, we would likely do an RFP and people would
Right,
apply,
right.
and we
Absolutely.
wouldn't just like, oh, go with the two people that we know, or that
Yeah,
we would just
absolutely.
put it out there and we would see what we would get, and then all of us would review, we'd interview, we'd ask the hard hitting questions, and then from there we'd see whatever their background was, and then from there we'd pick somebody. So I think it's like, we
Yeah.
would put it out and
Yeah.
we would see what would come in. I think
And if I may, at this point, just say that if we want to talk about hiring somebody to help us with that, that needs to be agendized separately.
Yeah.
Right now, we're only talking about the implementation guidelines. And I will say that, you know, I have gone online and I do have a number of master plans that other cities have done, and you know, and who did those. So I mean, if that's a desire of this committee to talk about master planning and talk about that, we have the ability to do that. And that's why, Lisa, we haven't brought that forward, because it's not been on the agenda yet.
Yeah.
Madison, you had your hand up on something else?
Yeah, so I think we should agendize that. I think that that's been something that, you know, the council has talked about previously, about having somebody on board to help us navigate planning cohesive public art for all of the Baylands. It's a big budget. And I think that it makes sense to bring in, you know, some help on that. So I think that we should agendize having a deeper conversation regarding that. Just regarding the implementation guidelines, I want to make sure that, and as Stuart kind of stated, that we really take our time to kind of think about what the next iteration of guidelines will be, because we just went to the council and said, here are all the changes we want to make. So to kind of go back, you know, just a few months later and say, oh, actually, we've got a whole other host of changes we want to make. It's just not a good look, in my opinion. It's something that we need to like take the time, make sure we go through everything, that if we feel like we got it in a good place. And of course, these are things that it's a living ordinance, right? And over time, we will learn things, just as we learned in the last process, and we will change. I'm just hoping that we're not like every 4 months trying to change the ordinance again and again and again, because while it is flexible, like it is also a whole city council process to change an ordinance like that. And I just don't want to see us continue going back over and over and over again every single year. So I think we should really spend time. And I think that as we move through like the next project, even if we get to that place before we bring suggestions back, we'll even learn more about, you know, the next project that we do and how that might guide where the ordinance goes also. So just wanted to throw that out there, that I think that it's worth, you know, kind of updating the ordinance to reflect how we want this body to work, but that we have to kind of really drill down and make sure when we send it that it's like we feel really good about those suggestions, at least for a while.
Mhm.
So could I just get real clarification before we move off the guidelines? So we really want to flesh out item number 1 about performance art and that part. Item 2, we would maybe just want to add just a little clearer line about equal opportunity, that we make every effort, like something like that. Then item 3, were we fine because council would get the final say to say no to the developer if the park commission, or excuse me, the art commission committee didn't like something or whatever, but it went to council to, I mean, was that the council would still be able to tell the developer no? Is that what I heard correctly, Stuart? So that doesn't need to change. We're just going to focus mostly on question number 1 and then maybe add a line to question number 2.
That would be my understanding at this point in time.
Is that correct, everybody? For everyone else's understanding? Okay, just so I can put it in my notes so they can really make sure to go back to that one piece. Okay, great. And then agendizing. Okay, the art consultant for the Baylands. And then, which is a really large project. Is there?
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
I thought that when they were talking consulting, we're talking even before the Baylands. Am I not?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, yeah, that the consulting doesn't come hand in hand, but rather that we're gonna at some point in time flesh this out, put an RFP out for someone to come in and help support, educate, and consult on the ongoing project process
Okay, great.
of public art. That person may be the Baylands person,
Right.
but it may not.
Correct. Okay.
All right.
Thank you. And then, and that can take some time, and the RFP can take time. Is there anything that we'd want to agendize, like a brainstorming session for the future to talk about like a small project that at least the committee can get put out there in general for
Yes.
the
and that would
public?
be-
Because I mean, it's been quite a while, you know, nobody, the skate park one, you know, the Welcome to Brisbane mural was dashed. Even if we took the people off, I guess that wasn't acceptable. So we haven't really delivered anything to the community that maybe
Right. And
you know,
Angel, that's where I was thinking that if
can take
if
a long time.
everyone had a map
Uh-huh.
on the places, that would help us begin to understand
Mhm.
actually where work can go. I
And
mean,
then
I'm
maybe
not
we could
sure
agree
if
on a
Lisa
spot.
or Beth even know the places that are being considered.
So should we put that on the next agenda as well as bring forth the map and maybe come to some
Is
thoughts
there
and
a way,
discussion
I'm
about that?
sorry, is there a way to send that map so that we actually could have a printed hard copy for all of us?
Sure.
You know, email it, you know what I mean?
Right,
Yeah,
we
email,
would include it as part of the agenda.
Yeah, like we
I
do with
know.
everything.
But if we could have it before so that it could be studied and better understood.
So you want to put out, because usually all the agenda and all the attachments go out the Friday before the
Oh,
meeting.
that's
So you want
fine.
it before?
No, no,
Oh,
that's fine. I don't
okay.
care. I'm just saying, whatever
Okay.
that is.
Yeah, yeah. And also I could bring it up during our discussion too, and we can zoom in on certain places that may be of interest for people to explore. Okay, so we'll do that for
So-
the next meeting. Sorry, Stuart.
Okay, no, so what I hear for the next meeting is to talk about the map and locations for the next public art project, to begin the discussion of a master plan for the city, and to bring forward, what I will do is I will provide a number of different master plans that other cities have done, so you can see what's included in master plan. So as we start developing an RFP, we can see what we want developed as part of the RFP, what aspects we would want to see, so that way we can find somebody who can help us through that. But we need to know what we want in our own master plan before we can do that. And then maybe if we have time to maybe start talking maybe about the definition for temporary art for the guidelines. I don't know if we can get to all 3 of them in an hour and a half, but if we can, that would be great. But if not, there's always other meetings. Beth, do you have a question or a comment?
So on the same theme of educating ourselves, before we start getting into the weeds with a potential project or hiring somebody, Stuart, you had mentioned that you were going to give us some visual examples of different other cities and what they've done. And
Well,
I think that some
yeah,
of what might be nice is that we start to really get to visualize like what is possible and what kinds of things we're attracted to and kinds of things we're like, oh, that even, I learn way more from really big mistakes. Like, like I have to mention that weird thing on Visitation on in Visitation Valley, that weird thing with the parking meters is like, what was that? Do you know what I'm talking about? So like when you see something like that, it's like, I think that it's really great to be able to chance to see like what works and what doesn't work and what are we attracted to, and what I think we have to really also start to think before we get into the weeds about any particular project, who are we in terms of Brisbane other than stars and butterflies? Like we got to really think about our sense of identity and what we want to, how we want art to bring this community together further and reflect who we are to each other and to the rest of the world. So that's what
Yeah,
I would.
That's always hard.
right, absolutely. I mean, we could bring examples of public art, but what I was anticipating was bringing examples of master plans so you can see what aspects of master plans you like, but we can also spend time going through pictures of public art as well, to determine what the aesthetic of the committee is. But it might make more sense to maybe do that in conjunction with knowing what it is that, who, as you said, who we want to be and what are our aesthetics we want to have, and then figure out what kinds of public arts or have been out there that kind of meet that aesthetic. I don't know, it may be a chicken and egg kind of conversation, unfortunately. We may need to do like a little bit of both and recognize that it will be a little bit bumpy as we get through it, as we learn more.
And if there's ever things like, I know that Karen has forwarded on things to Stuart and I previously in the past committee, like things that she's seen that she likes. So I've kind of have a dumping folder. So if there is something that you guys just randomly see or you're out and about, just send it to myself and or Stuart, and then I'll just dump that into the folder for either a future discussion or future things that you like, and we can just sort of kind of start collecting slowly now until we get to that point of talking as well, if you would prefer. If you like that idea, is fine.
I mean, the challenge with the public process is everything we do needs to be part of a public process and part of a public meeting. So when you send us something, we hold it until there is a topic in the public meeting that will be part of, that we can bring it forward to. If we just send it out to everybody and there's not an ability for the rest of the public to comment on what is sent out, it skirts to some extent, it may be seen as skirting the Brown Act. Yeah. And that's not what we want to do. So I know you send us stuff and it seems like we're just holding it, and we are until the topic comes up at a public meeting.
So yeah, just send it to Stuart and myself, and then I can dump that into a folder for the future. If there's anything in particular, for example, like I know that I think it was Lisa had sent, or maybe it was Beth, who had sent that one land art lady who changes areas that are distressed by previous previous city things like construction or old buildings and things like that, and then turns them and changes them in. And that was
fabulous, by the way.
That was I think I have to say that's absolutely had been one of my most favorite land art things.
That was pretty amazing.
So I have a question about how do, like, I sent it to you and CC'd Stuart because I knew I couldn't send it to everybody because of the Brown Act thing. But the thing that's a little frustrating to me about this whole sort of city meeting process is that I'm not really sure where the creativity and the dialogue and the brainstorming and the what ifs and all those kinds of things that, I mean, I don't know how that fits in this format. And so that's my question. How do we do this? And
we
don't get to talk about that.
We do that in a public meeting, just like we're doing today.
Mhm.
And what we
So-
would have is a topic that the public, if there's anybody from the public wants to weigh in on, they could participate in, but they need to be aware of what we're talking about.
Mhm. So that's why I was suggesting, okay, they want to bring the map and that'd be a good time for us to start throwing ideas out there and talking about it and like or don't like or whatever. So I think it's a good time to kind of weigh different ideas against you all to discuss. So that's why I was trying to figure out how to get that on the agenda so you guys can do that, have an open discussion about what you see, what you don't see, what you think Brisbane would like to represent in certain ways, or how that can be shown in different ways, and where maybe on the map it could be.
So like, would we need to, for example, agendize if everybody didn't watch that 6-minute PBS thing, and we wanted to be able to talk about what was cool about it and that kind of thing?
We
it
would have to
be on the
agendize that.
Mhm.
Yes, that would have to
Okay.
be on the agenda.
Okay, because it's kind of like, I love to send stuff like that, and I come across a lot of really amazing things, but then it kind of feels like, oh, what's the point? It just goes into a dump folder, as Sandy called it. You know?
Well, what it would be is that we would put on the agenda, discussion of that PBS. And so that way anybody from the public would be able to watch it and be able to discuss it with the committee as well.
Mhm.
I mean, the challenge is that, public stuff, and that's not the right word, but, public process should be done in the public. And it's been a challenge, and it does tend to stifle creativity, it seems, and it does tend to create what seems to be a very stilted process. But I think anybody who's been on any committee would say the same thing. It's a challenge, but this is, it's a process that we have to ensure that the public is aware of everything that's going on. So if you would like us to agendize that for the next meeting, we can put that on the agenda as well, or we could wait till a future agenda until we, go through everything else that we just talked about being on the agenda.
We could
Karen,
wait.
I now know you're not giving me a high five. I now know you have your hand raised.
I'll give you a high five too, Stuart.
Thank you.
Yeah, the whole Brown Act thing is tricky. It's like if if you want to talk about something that's on the agenda, you can only talk to one other person on this committee. You can't talk to 2 people. And realistically, if other people are trying to influence you from other committees and other places, you have to be very careful that another person who's on the city council hasn't influenced them. And I see that a lot. And it's, if I don't answer you, it's not because I don't like you. It's because maybe somebody else has spoken to me about a topic that I'm worried that if I even open my mouth to you, I'm going to get called out on the Brown Act. And everybody on this committee is equally, in danger of being called out on the Brown Act too. So it's like, okay, don't talk about things that might be on the next agenda. We've already now talked about, talking about consultants. So we can't go outside of this committee and start talking to other people about who might be on other committees within the city about consultants. It's sad in some ways, but the whole thing is to just that is this whole thing has got to be an open public process.
Right.
But
So-
when you send stuff to the city, if we stick it on the agenda, then we can all talk about it at a meeting. So
Right.
that's the route to take. But be very careful about speaking to people outside of this group about
Well-
anything that is even said here.
What we'll do is I know either Michael or Tom has given a memo about the Brown Act. So we'll put that we'll just add that to the agenda next time so everybody can have an understanding, a similar understanding of what the Brown Act entails and why we go through this very public process to have conversations. So if we can add that to the next one. I know Michael or Tom has done that for other committees, and we can just add that to here. And very much I understand that, we're only given an hour and a half once a month or as many times as you want to meet to have these conversations, and the conversations, cannot be free flowing, because if it's not on the agenda, it can't be discussed. And that to ensure that the public has equal access to everything that is being talked about from a public perspective. Just like, if something was going on at the city council, you wouldn't want to see the city council talk about it behind closed doors if it's something that's going to impact the whole city. And you have the same, you are that same equal kind of a body at this point in time. And I see we have 14 more minutes until we told you that we were going to give you back your life. Is there anything else about the guidelines that you would like to talk about today, or about what would be on a future agenda? Lisa?
I don't know who did in this meeting, but somebody talked about brainstorming. And I know it's kind of pie in the sky, but it would be nice after getting the map if we were allowed to have on the next agenda some ideas of maybe some art that maybe we've thought of and we've seen and we think that could work in certain spaces. I'd love to have some
Sure.
brainstorming about that.
We could agendize that as part of the map and everything.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
And given that, how about, I know Angel's going to want me to ask this question. When will be our next meeting? Or do we want to do this in November prior to Thanksgiving? Do we want to wait till after Thanksgiving? What is good for people? Because I'm not quite sure what everybody's holiday schedules are like.
I am gone from November the 12th to the 18th, just so you know.
Okay, and I will let you know I'm gone the week of Thanksgiving.
Maybe the
Not that
first
I'm
weekend.
part of the committee, so you don't need me, but.
Oh, we need you. But maybe the first week in December, are people around? Could we look at maybe first week of December?
Let me look.
Not the 4th.
Okay.
Not the 3rd.
Let's see here.
And this is the other challenge, is trying to get 7 people to be in the same room at the same time.
So
I
the
think
week of,
moving forward, we need to not just say, who's available when. We need to put it on a schedule, maybe sometime next year. And
what
say
about,
the third
That could
Wednesday.
be on our agenda as well, for the next one is to decide when will be the constant meeting dates for 2021. Could we put that on the agenda? Because I agree with.
Or 2022.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Whatever that next one is.
I agree. I second that.
do we want to look
So
at?
do you guys want I thought it was always the perspective of the body to have flexibility. And that was something that the body had liked in the past, that there was a flexibility. Are you suggesting that you want always the first Monday of the month for is that what you're suggesting?
I don't know if I'm suggesting that, it could be, but I'm also suggesting that if we take the calendar out and mark out at least 4 or 5 months in advance,
That is helpful.
that's helpful.
Okay.
Do we want to look at maybe December 6th or 7th at 4:30? Stuart, are you taking the 6th off?
7th.
No.
7th is good.
I'm free both those days so far.
I don't know because I'm on my phone. So I'm afraid to look and then I'll lose everybody. So
I'm okay for the 6th or the 7th at 4:30. Either way is fine.
And Camille gave a thumbs up and Madison was good. Karen, how does your schedule look? Okay, great. Okay, let's go ahead and do December 7th, and hopefully Danette is not traveling or some other fabulous life flying around. Okay, great. I will go ahead and I'll send that out for December 7th. So we do have 10 more minutes. Was there anything else to explore on the guidelines? Just to brainstorm on the guidelines at all about temporary art, or we just want to wait?
Let's cut out early.
Oh, can I
Yeah.
just ask one other thing? Is it always going to be the same Zoom address, or is it always going to be different?
I'm trying to keep it the same so it's easier.
That'd be nice.
So, yeah. So what I've been doing is just repurposing the calendar invite and just changing the date so it all stays the same. So I get to keep it. So
And maybe at some point we can all see each other in person again.
that would be nice. Great.
Okay.
And I checked my email and my text. I do not have any public comments. So for this meeting. All right.
Okay,
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you on December 7th.
Bye.
Okay.
thanks, bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.